This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Army Private First Class LaVena Johnson would have turned 23 this month, but 3 years ago, the African-American teenager from Missouri was found dead in Balad, Iraq, just a few weeks short of her 20th birthday. Her body was found in a tent belonging to the private military contractor Kellogg, Brown & Root. She'd abrasions all over her body, a broken nose, a black eye, burned hands, loose teeth, acid burns on her genitals, a bullet hole in her head. The Army labeled LaVena Johnson's death a suicide. They told her parents she died of self-inflicted non-combat injuries. But her parents never believed that story. They think she was raped and murdered, and that the Army's investigators ignored physical evidence that would have proved this. The Johnsons are now demanding a full congressional investigation into their daughter's death. We invited the military to come on the show. They declined. The Criminal Investigation Command told us that, quote, facts are facts. They stand by their investigation that concluded LaVena Johnson's death a suicide. I'm joined now from St. Louis, Missouri, by Dr. John Johnson and Linda Johnson, the parents of the slain Iraq veteran Private LaVena Johnson. They claim that she was killed. Again, the military says it was a suicide. We're also joined by a former Army Reserve Colonel, Ann Wright. She served in the U.S. Army for 29 years, was also a U.S. diplomat for 16. She resigned in March 2003 in opposition to the war in Iraq. Ann Wright joins us on the phone from Dallas. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! I want to start with Linda Johnson. Can you tell us about why your daughter went into the military and how you learned that she had been killed?
Why she went in, because my daughter LaVena was a very patriotic person. She loved this country, and she thought she was doing something good. She thought she was doing something right. She first had discussed this with her dad. I was not in agreement with this at all, because I just thought she was just going straight on to college. She was an honor roll student. She was a very good student, and the most beautiful daughter that any mother would want to have. Like I said, she had discussed this with her dad first, and finally they told me.
In July of 2005, your daughter LaVena became the first female soldier from Missouri to die in Iraq. How did you learn of her death, Linda Johnson?
At 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, July 19th, there was a knock at my front door. I immediately jumped up because everyone was still asleep. And I looked out the window, and I saw one soldier standing at the door. And I immediately told John, and he jumped up, and I just had a sadness in my heart. John ran downstairs and opened the door, and I began crying, and I couldn't make it any further than my balcony. And John opened the door, and the soldier took out a little black book, and he asked the question, are you Dr. John Johnson, the father of Private LaVena Lynn Johnson? And he said, yes, I am. And then he looked up and he saw me, and I'm sure he heard me. And he asked, are you Linda Johnson, the mother of Private LaVena Lynn Johnson? And I said, yes, I am. What do you want? And he opened the little black book and he began to read, and said he regretfully informed us that our daughter, Private LaVena Lynn Johnson, was dead. And I lost it, and I began screaming, and I ran to try to get to my other children. Of course, they heard the commotion, and they began just screaming and hollering. And we were just in shock, disbelief, because I had just spoke with my daughter on Sunday, July 17th, and everything was fine. There was no distress, no sadness. She was her bubbly self. We talked, we laughed, and we were making plans. She was telling me how she would be coming home sooner than she expected, and certainly would be home for Christmas, which was her favorite time of the year. I got a chance to finally make it to my 2 older sons, and I just collapsed in their arms because I just could not believe it, and my heart broke. And that was the worst day of my life, and we've been battling with some lying demons ever since.
Dr. John Johnson, when did you learn how your daughter died?
Let me make one thing clear. LaVena was a private when she died. They post-mortemly promoted her after she was dead. But the first implication that we got in terms of a mode of death was told to us by the casualty, LaVena from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. He told me that LaVena was found dead in her barracks with a gunshot wound to the head. I know a lot of people, and I know people who knew people over there. So we had a friend of ours that was a police officer. So he immediately emailed a friend of his that was there and asked where she was found. And that friend emailed him back and said that LaVena was found dead in a contractor's tent. My friend was so distraught over it, he was on his way over to our house and he had a heart attack. He didn't die, but it was severe. Then the next day, I had a relative that brought me a message. And that message, in essence, said that LaVena knew some people who were near DFAS 2, and that's where her body was found, in a contractor's tent. So it wasn't until, so I was told it was a gunshot wound to the head, and the casualty, LaVena, told me that. And when her body got here, I looked her body over, and I saw a hole on the left side of her head near the temporal lobe. And so I went to the news media the next day, and I said, they said my daughter shot herself in the head. She's right-handed, and the bullet hole was on the left side of her head. On the 10th of August, the pathologist from Dover Air Force Base called me, and he said what I saw was an exit wound, and we got into a debate over what that was an exit wound from, and he finally said it was from an M16 rifle, and I thought that was ridiculous.
Why?
Because I'm a veteran, and I'm very familiar with that M16 rifle and its capacity. And first of all, my daughter was 5'1", and that weapon is 40 inches long. And let's say if she did manage to get it into her mouth, then the recoil from that weapon would have blown her face off. Let's say if she was tall enough and she got it in her mouth pretty well, when that bullet pops out of that barrel, it starts tumbling all over the place. So when it exits in a straight line, and it tears a huge hole in one's head. This bullet hit at the temporal lobe, bounced, and ended up going 2 1/4 inch toward the temporal lobe and popped out. And that is a hand revolver and not an M16 rifle.
What other signs did you see, or marks did you see on your daughter's body?
I could tell that her nose had been broken because plastic surgery had been done. Even though she had makeup on, I could see an abrasion up under her eye. I could see that her lips had been busted because right on the edges, right near the edges of both lips, I could see what looked like a cut. And her gloves were glued on her hands, and I thought that was peculiar. I was pretty confident she'd been beaten.
You're calling for an investigation?
Correct.
Who have you spoken to?
We spoke with Ike Skelton on the 9th of April. We left some information there. They went through that package, and apparently I was told that they were impressed with the information that we had. Then I understand a subcommittee went to the Army, and of course I don't know why they expect the Army to say, yeah, we're lied. The Army said, yeah, everything went just fine. Criminal investigators did their job. Pathologists did their job. Everything was just fine. And I couldn't believe that I got a letter from the subcommittee saying that they felt that the Army's decision was correct, that it was a suicide. When we were back in Washington this past week, we got a chance to speak with Congresswoman Diane Watson. We talked, and we got some positive feedback from her.
What makes you think your daughter was raped?
The Army originally sent us black and white